Welcome to the Ultimate Coach Podcast, Conversations from Being, inspired by the book, The Ultimate Coach, written by Amy Hardison and Alan Thompson. Join us each week with the intention of expanding your state of being, and your experience will be remarkable. Remember, this is a podcast about being. It is a podcast about you. To explore more deeply, visit theultimatecoachbook.com. Now, enjoy today's conversation from being.
Welcome back. My name's Philippe Bartu, and out of all the extraordinary stories in the Ultimate Coach book, one of them really stuck out for me. It moved me to tears, and many people had the same experience that I've spoken to. This is the story of Byron Applegate. And it's the kind of story that if you hear it, you would almost think, did this happen for real? Byron, I'm so delighted for you to be here today. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, absolutely. This is my pleasure. And I agree with you. Is this for real? That's something that would go through my mind if I was reading it too. Like, is this a Disney episode?
Where
does this come from? Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. And I just want to start before we jump in. I want to acknowledge you for what it took for you to be here today. I know that being on podcast is something you've never done before. And the story has been held very sacred to you. And outside the book, you haven't really shared it with anyone.
Yeah, that's true. It's just really sensitive. I mean, it's magical, but it's sensitive. It shows me at my most vulnerable point. And to even say or acknowledge to ourselves that, hey, I've had suicidal thoughts. Not going to lie, it's almost embarrassing. Like, really? You thought about killing yourself? But man, it was a dismal time. And I haven't shared this. I haven't told my children the story. My closest family and friends, I haven't told the story. In fact, when Alan Thompson reached out to me, asking me to share with him my experiences with Steve, this is what came to mind. And so I shared what I thought was very poignant in my life, a huge time in my life, a huge event, if you will. Mm-hmm. So when he asked me to share it and I wrote it, I'm not kidding you, Philip, I cried. Like I couldn't write it without crying. I couldn't edit it without crying. I couldn't reread it without crying. When I sent it and Amy came back to me, Amy is Steve's wife. When she came back to me with edits, when I read it again, I cried. And getting ready to talk to you, I read it again and I was like, oh, for the first time I could read it without crying. So
that's so beautiful. What is it that made you accept the invitation to be here today?
The conversation that we had, the energy that you put out, the fact that I feel and felt not only safe with you, but a responsibility to do this because of who it might help. And so kind of putting some of my own guardedness aside because I think it's the right thing to do.
That's beautiful. Thank you for saying that. And I'd like to start by hearing that story again. And maybe you can just give us a reminder, because if you haven't read the book, go and read the story first before listening to this. It's and at the same time, I want to hand it over to you, Byron. Take us back to, it was just a few months before 9/11.
Yeah,
what happened?
It's just a few months before, when things are great.
Yeah.
Right? That summer was, man, I thought I'd arrived. It was, everything was clicking, right? Yacht shopping, had NetJets fly in a plane, had all this stuff going on, the valuation of the company, everything was just clicking. And then it didn't. With 9/11, I'm not a victim to 9/11. I'm just saying that in that moment was financial disarray. We didn't know what was going to happen, right? And then the not knowing is people don't know what to do. I mean, if you have information, you can make a decision, but if you don't have all your information, it's hard to make a decision. So in our business, where we collected bad debt, we didn't know whether or not people were going to have the resources to pay on that. So our things started spiraling out of control with the aftermath of 9/11. It wasn't. I guess I was being very reactionary. I think that's probably the right way to say it. I wasn't being proactive. I wasn't following a plan. I was trying to keep from going under.
And what I understood from the story is you were also in denial about the dire situation of your finances and just trying to get loans to keep things afloat.
Yeah. Do you want me to tell a little bit of that?
Yeah. Share a little bit about just to kind of paint
the story.
Yeah, paint a bit of the picture, sort of where you were at when all of that was going on.
So there was the time before the experience with Steve, and I think we're going to talk about that. But the reality is that I started borrowing money at a huge velocity. Putting money on huge cash advances on credit lines, blew through $500,000 in about 2 months. Of my own money, went through about another $1 million of credit lines over the next 2 or 3 months, and was doing everything I can to just keep my business afloat and keep offices open. And I started drinking a lot. And I wasn't really a big drinker before, but I started drinking a lot, and I started working through the night, and I just go to the office, started keeping vodka in the fridge at the office, and just trying to find a way to keep the business afloat. And I was started having really weird thoughts. I don't know where they come from. That's actually a decent question to think of. Where do these thoughts come from? And maybe we can drill down on that later. But I'd drive down the road, and I'd think, if I just yanked the steering wheel to the left and hit, whether it was, go off that cliff or hit that car, or hit that pole, or started thinking that just pull hard and this is over. And that thought would pop in my head. And I'd never had those kind of thoughts before. But it started being something that was occurring for me regularly. And it was not something I was talking to anybody about. And then we come to the dream. Do you want to talk about the dream?
Yeah, let's go there.
So if you've seen A Christmas Tale, I think it's Charles Dickens, where you have Ebenezer Scrooge and he dies, and you have the angel of death that comes, and angel of Christmas past and angel of Christmas present, those guys. Well, this night I have an angel walking me through the aftermath of my life, or my family's life, after my death. And as this angel and I or guide and I are walking through my life, or my children's lives and my wife's life, because I'm not there, and seeing how their life looks, realizing the mess that I'd left them, and knowing that it was my fault, knowing that they were living in a different existence, like small town. I remember one part of the dream specifically I remember is seeing my son Hunter playing baseball on a little dirt field in a little small town in Utah. And there's really nobody in the stands, but my wife and my daughter, and thinking he's never going to have the opportunities because he doesn't have me. I'm not here to help him have opportunity. And it was my fault. And in the morning when I woke up, if you've ever had a dream where when you wake up and you're not sure.
There's a piece of the story I just want to make sure that is clear. You say with my angel. Who was it that was there in your dream?
I'm going to tell you in a second, if that's okay, because I think sure. there's a timing to that. Like everybody knows, but this is really poignant for me, if that's all right. That I wake up feeling that kind of foggy feeling of when you're kind of caught between dream world and real world.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I stood up and I went out and just opened the door to go out into the pool from my bedroom and fell in the pool naked. And I'm just floating, kind of looking at the sky, thinking, what the heck? What was that? And my wife came out and she has my robe and she says, hey, you might want to put this on. Steve Hardison's here. And I go, what? And she said, yeah, he's in the living room. So I get out of the pool naked, which is right in front of the living room, by the way. And I put my robe on, I walk in, I come out and I see Steve. And anybody listening to this who knows Steve knows that he's going to give you a big old hug. So here I am naked in a robe and Steve gives me his big old bear hug. And I just said, Steve, what are you doing here? And keep in mind, Steve has never been to this house. I've known Steve for 30 years, but he'd never been to this home. And he said, I've been with you all night. So the answer to your question, Philip, is it was Steve Hardison. And I started to tell him about my dream. And he said, I know, I had the same dream. And as weird as it is, as magical as it is, as sci-fi, as Star Trek or whatever you want to call it, as it is, we'd had the same dream and we've talked about it since. It's just a magical moment where somehow he and I had this dream and he was my angel and he was there to walk me through the aftermath.
Yeah. And I'm still in complete awe with that story. That's just so divine, so beautiful. And what happened after that?
I think the choice of words you just had was really spot on. It was divine. It was divine. How is that? Yeah. How is it that we're all connected? What is that? People have different religions or thoughts and, theories about how that all works. And not to really jump into one sect or another. I'm just saying somehow we are all connected. And in that moment, for Steve to be connected with me in a way that he would not just share the dream, but what he told me was when he woke up, he knew that he had to save my life.
Yeah. So in that moment, would you say you experienced that connection, that you felt you were connected to something far greater? Is that something you experienced?
In that moment, I wouldn't say so.
No.
In the aftermath, I would say I've experienced it a lot.
Right.
In that moment, just keeping in mind, I was in a really dismal place. In fact, one of the things Steve said to me as we're sitting there on the couch talking is, Byron, you're already bankrupt. You just don't, you're just in denial.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't sure if I should be offended or enlightened because it was a little bit of both. But realistically, that as I look back on it over the years, yes, I see like whatever you want to call God, I call God God.
Mm-hmm.
Saved my life, saved me for another day for a reason. And Steve got to be the angel. I think if you were to ask Steve, he probably would tell you that it was, he feels blessed, that to be able to be called on for that, to be maybe the conduit that came through. He certainly doesn't have any ego about it. Yeah. And and neither do I. This isn't, like when you asked me to do this, I said, as long as this isn't really about how great I am or how great Steve is, because that was such a moment of bigger than that. these two guys.
Yeah. I mean, the word that comes to me is divine intervention.
Yeah.
Like something greater of the essence of divinity created an intervention that stopped you from committing suicide and living.
I think you packaged that correctly. I like the way you put that. I think you're right. It was divine intervention, and it was to preserve my life for another day, and maybe to teach me, and now by us sharing this, maybe teach others.
Yeah. So from that experience in your life, how is your life like the day to day? What do you notice that or if anything at all, is different or that you're more sensitive to from that experience?
Let me tell you that I did end up declaring bankruptcy and going through that process. And before bankruptcy, it feels like death. You're going to lose everything. Mm-hmm. There's certainly ego attached to going bankrupt for anybody.
Yeah.
And on the other side, so there's still a struggle, right? I had to get through that time of my life. But on the other side of it, I realized that bankruptcy was just a word, and it's just an event.
Yeah.
And I sleep in the same exact bed with the same exact woman, and I pet the same exact dog. The only difference is I don't know all these people, and I don't have the same house, and some of the stuff I had to go away. It was kind of the birth, if you will, of realizing what's really important in life and getting get over money, get into relationships and experience and savoring life and being full of a lot of gratitude. I remember the day my bankruptcy was discharged, how I felt like I just lost 1,000 pounds of all the pressure of the world off of me. And I remember, like, even since then, like you asked me about, what it's like now, even anybody who comes to me for coaching or advice or mentoring, one of the first things I tell people is, if you want to know how to handle stress, start with gratitude. If I would have been in gratitude, I wouldn't have been suicidal, but I wasn't in gratitude. I was in denial. I was in resistance. I was in ego. I hadn't learned, but I was blessed enough. I want to choose that word carefully because it really was a blessing that someone would save my life and help me learn so that I could still be here and share it with someone else.
I'm also just hearing the lightness from that in losing everything, how you can lose all of that money and all your possessions, but you can never lose the essence of who you are and who you are being. Who are you being when you start to notice that? Like, what were the shifts that you started to experience at the level of your being?
Well, to start with, there was the event. And those of you who know Steve or have worked with Steve, you'll know that Steve's really big on commitment. In fact, if you hire Steve, he charges what he charges to make sure you're committed. It's not about he's trying to be expensive, because he's not. It's not even that he's flamboyant or something with money, because he's not. He wants you to be committed. And he committed. He sat with me that day and said, listen, I need you to give me your word on something. Now, having worked with Steve, I understand what that means. You better be willing to die for it. Don't you dare give Steve Hardison your word and not keep it. He used to say, if you have an appointment with Steve, he used to say, if I'm not there, I'm dead. And if I'm late, check the obituaries. I mean, he's serious about keeping commitments. And he said, I need you to give me your word. You're going to call me before you kill yourself and give me a chance. And I gave him my word. And that's what saved my life. Honestly, it was in that moment, not even the dream.
Yeah.
Because I knew that I wasn't going to make that call to Steve Hardison and And then he said, I need you to make another commitment to me. You're not safe to drive. So you don't drive anywhere for the next week and maybe 2. But I want you to go anywhere you go with someone else driving. And if you don't have somebody to drive you, then you don't go. And again, I gave him my word. And again, that's what saved my life. I think I don't remember how much I said in the book, to be honest, but just reconnecting with people and saying, hey, come give me a ride. And this goes back to where you're asking about being. Think about this. I call my little sister who's 8 years younger and say, hey, can you give me a ride? And I live a mile from my office. She lives 10 miles away. Mindy, can you come pick me up and take me to my office? Sure. Why? What's up? I'm not safe to drive.
Yeah.
And then you have to share with your sister and talk to her about what's really going on and other friends and other people. And so that commitment made me connect with others. And I think that goes to what you're asking about being. Where am I at? I'm being connected with people.
Yeah. Well, it forced you to get out of isolation and be in connection.
Yeah. And it's one of the reasons I said yes to doing this.
Yeah.
Can we connect in a way that someone hears this, whether they're suicidal or not, isn't even the question.
Yeah.
Do you need to get out of your own head? Or you need to get out of your own fear or pain or whatever and connect with people?
Yeah, that's so beautiful, because people that are listening to this, they don't need to be suicidal, but I think a lot of people can relate to what it feels like to feel like you've got the weight of the world on you. And I know, looking back in my life, when I was 29 years old, I had a restaurant, and it was a time when I was, very successful on the outside, but very, very extremely stressed and very, very committed to looking good and surviving and just trying to make it, really. And in that, I had a seizure and was forced to close the restaurant. And I separated with my girlfriend, we'd been together for 9 years. And it was the letting go of the 2 things I cherished the most and I was most afraid to lose that allowed me to access my biggest liberation. And I felt so free, because I was no longer attached to the very 2 things I was most attached to. And very, very confused, and was still, even though, I was met with a lot of pain. But ultimately it gave me such a sense of freedom, and it opened me up to then explore and connect with the world in a way that I was so just caught up in the busyness of life. Before that, I hadn't even realized how isolated I had made myself be. And I think that's something a lot of people can relate to, because it's almost like socially acceptable to be always busy, but at the same time, like, that busyness becomes a way of being that creates really it affects your listening, it affects your presence, it affects your ability to just be in life.
It's interesting, because I know you shared with me once about the restaurant, but you just said something that kind of made me think. It's a very social business. You were in a restaurant / bar, right? It was both. Didn't it have a restaurant and a bar?
Yeah, it was very social. I was around people all day long.
And yet you felt isolated.
Oh, I felt so isolated, because was the difference between, it's actually for me, it was the highest form of loneliness, is feeling lonely in a room full of people. It's a different experience than feeling lonely when you're just by yourself. For me, there was a superficiality to my profession, which really required pleasing. So what I just became very good at pleasing, and the restaurant was a stage and I was an actor, and I put on a facade, and I was very, very good at looking cool, calm, and collected, when inside I was just hiding how stressed I was and how much fear I had about all the possible things that could go wrong. I was always thinking about the future and what everything I still need to do. And so it was a very confusing time for me, because I felt like I'd created all the conditions in my life that I thought I needed to be happy and successful. But I just felt empty, lost, and just really stressed, actually, just the whole time. And I was able to hide it. Like, it's like this, I was functionally depressed. Like, if you looked at me, you would say, this is a great guy. He's just like, I was in denial about how bad it was. See, I wouldn't even admit it to myself. And if you would ask me, I would just tell you how great everything is.
Yeah.
That's the level of self-denial and just, disconnection.
So I think this is really kind of I'm really glad you shared that, because this is the place where the magic happened in this story, right? And it's supernatural, crazy, magical to anybody who reads it, including me and Steve.
Yeah.
And yet it happened.
Yeah.
And then your story, where you built a successful business and a long-term relationship, and yet you felt alone and stressed and isolated, but you didn't look like it. I think that at the essence of what happened for me was an eternal, if you will, or outside of our bodies, like however it works out, that our spirits and our souls connect. Intuition, where that comes from, something in that realm of where we connect is where Steve and I connected. And I've known him a really long time. I think it's important to note that Steve and I we're not best friends. He hadn't been to my home. I think I said that earlier. And he and I weren't really talking, but yet I were connected in this realm to where we had this experience. And he loved me enough to come over and be there with me. And I think about, like, have you ever gone to a funeral and after the funeral, you just feel like, man, you got your priorities straight. You see this person, maybe they were younger or not, but more so when someone's younger that passes away, that you think you're grateful. You spend a lot of time in gratitude. You maybe don't rush back to work. You go ahead and go get lunch or dinner with your wife or who you're with, and you spend some quality time, and you just get your priorities straight, because you realize that you've been on the hamster wheel. And you went to a funeral and you knew this person, and all of a sudden you're like, dang, I'm so grateful for the people in my life. I'm grateful for my health. Instead of thinking I need something, you start being grateful for what you have, right? That's kind of a common experience with funerals.
Yeah.
And then fast forward, 72 hours, and you forget all about that and you're back on the hamster wheel.
Right.
That's happened to everybody, right?
Yeah.
Well, what do you do to stay connected so that you, Philip, don't become isolated? What do I, Byron, do so that I stay connected with other people, maybe err on the side of vulnerable instead of on the side of arrogant, which would be my tendency, or err on the side of like, I got this, I'll do it all my way, force versus faith, force versus faith, connected versus isolated, humble, allowing the universe to bless you, allowing other people to help you, which is super hard to let other people help you.
Yeah.
Those are the things when you say, what did it affect me? You realize we're talking about over 20 years later. And so what does it affect me like now? Be grateful for what I have, and be connected with the people if you ask Steve who his favorite client is or what is that he's working with, he probably would tell you whoever's right in front of me. Yeah. Right. And something along that lines. Yeah. And, can we be that way? I think we're getting better. I'm getting better at it. I haven't known you that long, but I think you're good at it. It's really, can you be present to who's in front of you and really connect with the person in front of you? Because we are all connected. When we act isolated, I'm saying act because somehow we buy our own bullshit and we believe we're independent. When we don't and we become connected, there's so much beauty. There's love. There's helping. And then bounty comes your way. As crazy as it is, that if we don't try to force it, things come. We can trust the universe.
Yeah, it's being in connection versus being in isolation, like as a distinction. For most of my life, it wasn't, I didn't have that clarity of distinction. And I just felt I had a superficial level of connection in my work. And it wasn't until I got present to the fact that I was living a life of superficiality and isolation that I could actually see there's another way. See, now looking back, connection is like it's like the WD-40 of everything in my life and in how I live. I mean, I have a 5-month-old baby, and I tell you, it's just like, wow, I can't imagine life without connection now. And it's just beautiful to be reminded of that, Byron, and to also just acknowledge how, the whole experience of reading this book has been an experience of coming closer to home, closer to spirit, closer to this miracle that we can only describe as a miracle of what happens when we start to experience ourselves as someone who is connected to everyone and everything. And then we start seeing that this miraculous ways of being that the book emanates is something that we all can be. And then it becomes exciting and full of possibility. And that's what these conversations are designed to remind us of, because we can forget, right?
Yeah, it's like I said, you go to a funeral and 72 hours later, you're back on a hamster wheel. But boy, right after that funeral, you're so connected with whoever you're with, or walk around the room and you hug other people that you haven't seen forever. And you're like, you want to connect. You say, hey, let's do lunch. And then you don't.
Yeah.
You don't go to lunch. You saw somebody you haven't seen in a year. And you're like, oh man, I miss you. Love to see you. Let's do lunch. And then you don't. I'm not the only person who's done that. And so what I think is the magic that lasts is learning to say yes, maybe to a podcast, yes to lunch, actually find time. When someone reaches out to you, you don't know if they're hurting. Think about that. Somebody's like, hey, Phil, how's it going? Hey, you want to do lunch sometime? Like, dude, I'm really busy. You don't know. Maybe that guy really needs to see you. So say yes every time you can. Mm-hmm. And try to make room for people, because people have made room. At least I can't speak for everyone else, but look, somebody went out of their way to come to my house and save my life. Universe went out of its way because I was too thick-headed. Probably, somebody else wouldn't need a miracle, but boy, I did. I'm just really grateful, Philip. I got to be honest. Yeah. The fact that I got to have that experience and that I get to focus on who do I need to be. When I write my goals down now, and this I'm just like everybody else. Yes, I've been a student of Steve Hardison's. Yes, I've known him for 30 years. But really, when the book came out, it made me start really looking at who am I being? And mostly from some conversations with Steve, where he's like, you read the book? Yeah. Did you ask yourself the questions? Did you read the back cover? Did you read the questions? I mean, and then read it again. And so I started doing that and looking at who do I need to be? And now when I write goals, and I have my goals, before my goals, I ask myself the question, who do I need to be to accomplish this goal? And I actually write that as I write my goals. Yeah. And if we were to look at this and say, what are we doing? Well, we're connecting.
That's right.
I mean, you're 10,000 miles away and we're connecting. Yeah. We're sharing this with people we've neither one ever met and maybe won't, to connect.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what we're creating. We're creating just more connection, but we're also creating access to, I don't know what to say to that, like access to, there's a sense of like something much greater than ourselves. So access to, this word divinity that keeps coming back. And like after having been in conversation with you, and it's not the first time we speak, I tell you what happened to me is I started becoming a lot more present to the synchronicities. I started to, I was reminded about this idea of going from like an inspired idea to action. So I started reaching out again to people that before I would kind of talk myself out of, and I'd be like, oh, I'm going to connect with this person. And I did that right after speaking to you. And with two people, it happened that they just said to me, oh, I was just thinking of you. How nice that you wrote to me. And it was almost like that conversation just reactivated that we are all connected. And in a way, I was like, oh, that's nice. But as I just stopped to think about it, I thought, well, that's a miracle right there. That very person at the other side of the world was thinking of me, that I wrote to her, and that started that's just started a whole new conversation. And to me, that's, that can look like that's just ordinary, but there's something extraordinary about that I'm really getting present to.
Not everybody knows who Wayne Dyer was. Some people are his fans and some people not. Most people know who Deepak Chopra is, and they were friends, right? And I shared this story with you, but they were friends. And Wayne there's a tape recording out there where Wayne is talking to Deepak Chopra, and he goes, well, Deepak Chopra calls Wayne, and Wayne said, Wayne calls Deepak Chopra. I don't know, I got it right the first time. Deepak Chopra calls Wayne, and Wayne says, I was just thinking of you. And Deepak Chopra's response was, yeah, I got your message in the field, the infinite field. And that's, I think, the experience you had with your friend.
Yeah.
Or the fact that I have in 2 hours from now, somebody's picking me up to take me to the airport. I was taking an Uber, and I'm self-sufficient, full grown man. I know how to get there. I'll get an Uber. And my daughter called me. Hey, Daddy, what time are you going to the airport? And I said, 4:30. She goes, oh, do you want to ride? I go, no, I'll Uber. She goes, why? I go, well, no, because I'll Uber. You don't need to bother. You get rush hour traffic, blah, blah, blah. No, I want to take you. Scarlett, my granddaughter, Scarlett, and I want to see you. Say yes. Let them serve you.
Yeah.
Right? Let them serve you. What are they going to get out instead of being so dang independent? Let them serve you. And then what else is going to come from it? Other than the fact that I get to see my granddaughter, will just light my whole week up. Right?
Yeah.
But what about the littlest thing? Let someone serve you, or be the guy who says, no, let me take you.
Yeah.
Because we get to connect. Our world makes it easy. We can do everything on phone, internet, pick some social media. We can be self-sufficient and have food delivered to our houses and a car pick us up. But where's the human connection? Where's the need and need? Like, we all have needs. Letting somebody help you satisfy your needs and then helping someone else satisfy theirs. That in tune place where we are all connected in the infinite field, again, whatever you call it, is, I think, how it is the only explanation I can give you for how that even happened. And then the magic is now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here. I'm alive. I'm sharing this, and I'm learning. I'm still learning. I'm growing. I'm becoming more based in love, based in gratitude, not based in things and based in accomplishments. I have more faith. I trust the universe. And in that moment back then, Philip, I was trying to make it happen because I was going to will it. I was going to force it. There was no allowance. There was no faith. It was just me getting it freaking done. And in reality, I probably should have just stopped and let it go, but I didn't know how to let go. And that'd probably be a whole nother podcast, but learning how to let go, you with your restaurant after, like, how do you let go? 9-year relationship or 7?
Yeah. 9 years.
A 9-year relationship and building your restaurant. It had to have been like,
oh, and you wouldn't believe
you had.
how many times I heard the voice saying, slow down, slow down, slow down. And I would just override it.
So
Because
finally,
like you,
Caesar says, I'll slow your ass down.
exactly. Yeah. I was just trying to make it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's ego. I don't know.
Of course.
Ego's a
It
word,
is.
right? But
It's
that driving force.
it isn't, we identify with this isolated self that, I need to push through, I need to do it. And, and that creates, just a lot of stress and isolation. Yeah. Yeah. This has just been an amazing reminder for me, as you share your story, just to reflect back on my life as well. And just how grateful I am for, the way that you showed up today was so beautiful. The way that you shared so vulnerably and impactfully. I feel really moved by our time together tonight, Byron. So thank you for who you've been throughout this conversation. I really feel connected to something far greater. And that's so beautiful to feel. For people who want to know more about you, or if they want to be in touch with you, how could they connect with you, Byron?
I'm not a social media guy. So if you look me up on Facebook, I think there is a page, but if you message me, I'll never see it. So my email is byron.applegate@gmail.com. You can reach out to me. I'm happy to help anybody I can, or connect with anybody who wants to connect.
Great. We'll put that in the show notes. And Byron, we've come to the end of our time together, and just want to say again, thank you so much for your beautiful contribution today. And thank you for all the listeners as well who have been listening with us. Byron, is there anything you want to say before we complete this episode tonight?
Yeah, I want to say, first of all, thanks to you, Philip, for being a man who wanted to instigate this conversation and share it with the world and gift to the world the way you're putting your heart and soul into doing this. I first of all appreciate and acknowledge you. I also want to acknowledge Steve Hardison for being a man who is so not just like to say the word committed to people, but to be committed to me in the way that he has been, and that he would show up not just at my door to save my life, but to show up in my life to save my life and to help better my life. And the gift that Steve has been to me, I want to make sure I acknowledge him, because he has been one of the most influential people in my life. And the number of stories are countless. I also want to acknowledge Amy for all the hard work she put into doing the book, and Alan Thompson for all the work that he did. What an undertaking. And then I think I'd want to leave on being grateful for the couple of things I learned. I learned a lot about commitment from Steve Hardison. I know we're short on time, but I will tell you that I if I can, a really quick story. Can I?
Yeah, please go ahead.
There was a time, this is 20 something years ago, when I asked Steve, I used to wake up on Monday mornings and be really stressed out and kind of paralyzed. Like I wouldn't really get things going. And I asked him, do you ever experience that? Like a paralysis of just anxiety? And he said, oh yeah. Of course I thought he'd say no, because I thought he was Superman. And I said, well, what do you do? He goes, well, I just look at whatever my commitments are and I go to work on them. He said it usually within 10 minutes will solve it, but 100% of the time within an hour. If I just focus on doing my commitment, that anxiety will go away and I'll find myself in the zone and stuff will start happening. And I now have Monday mornings be sacred. Any of my family or friends who say, hey, let's get together next week, I say, not on Mondays. Because Mondays I crush it. I go to work on my commitments. I get my week set up. And I learned to do that from Steve, being like, turn to your commitment. And I told you what saved my life was that he made me commit to him.
Yeah.
So just that lesson in being committed. And then I want to acknowledge him for that. Just helping to teach me who I'm being, even now, and to reach out and call me and say, Byron, are you reading the book? And are you thinking about who you're being? It's a book on being. And I'm like, no, it's not a book on being. It's a book about the ultimate coach. And he's like, well, then you need to read it again. But to really get that, like, who are we being?
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that whoever hears this, hears that.
Yeah.
That, our
so good.
Connection and who we're being is just really the essence.
Yeah. Thank you for that story. That's such a practical, really powerful reminder. Come back to your commitment. Get back into action. Honor your commitment. Don't identify with your thoughts and feelings and anxiety.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't know where all that comes from, but sometimes that stuff can really rack all of us, right? Everybody's been a victim of the mental militia that is just, what are they, what are they, what's going on here? You can just be confused by all the thoughts in your head.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thanks for having me, Philip. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you inviting me to be part of your program.
Well, hey, thank you, Byron. Thank you for joining. And thank you again to all our listeners.
You bet.
Till next time.
All right. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you know someone who would benefit from today's conversation, please share this podcast with them. Also, we invite you to visit theultimatecoachbook.com so you can continue your personal exploration of being. There you will find links to join our wonderful community, get your own copy of the Ultimate Coach book, and more. Simply go now to www.theultimatecoachbook.com. That's www.theultimatecoachbook.com. The link is also available in the show notes. We appreciate your support. Be blessed. Be you.